All right, so Julian Assange, he's back in the headlines, recently released now in Australia, but the controversy surrounding his case is far from over.
Yeah, it seems like this story just keeps unfolding.
It really does. And this time it involves the Council of Europe, a major human rights organization. They've issued a resolution about Assange's treatment in the UK, and it's raising some serious questions.
Right. And what makes this so interesting is that the Council of Europe, they're not just some symbolic group. They have real influence on the international stage, especially when it comes to human rights.
Oh, we should take their concerns seriously.
Absolutely. Their resolutions, they might not be legally binding, but they carry a lot of weight politically. And for a country like the UK, a founding member of the council being called out like this, it could have real repercussions.
So we're talking reputational damage on the world stage. What exactly is it about Assange's treatment that has the council so riled up?
Well, their resolution uses some strong language. They're actually calling Assange a political prisoner.
Wow, that's a loaded term.
It really is. And it has deep implications. They're basically accusing the UK of failing to protect his fundamental rights, like freedom of expression and the right to liberty. They're even demanding a thorough investigation into whether Assange was subjected to torture or inhumane treatment during his 5 years in Belmarsh Prison.
Okay, so that's a pretty serious accusation. How has the UK responded to all of this?
Well, their initial response has been pretty defensive. The Home Office, which handles these matters, basically said that they follow the rules and procedures for extradition requests.
But haven't they really addressed the council's concerns about potential human rights violations?
Not directly. They seem to be focusing on the fact that the extradition case was resolved, but they haven't really engaged with the broader issues raised by the council.
And that's where things get even more intriguing, because Stella Assange, Julian's wife, has accused the UK government of a potential cover-up.
Right, she's claiming that some crucial documents related to Assange's imprisonment have gone missing.
Missing documents? That sounds suspicious.
It does. And Stella Assange is specifically pointing the finger at the Crown Prosecution Service, the body responsible for prosecutions in England and Wales. She says they're withholding information that could shed light on the political motivations behind Assange's treatment.
Okay, so what kind of information could be in these missing documents?
That's the million-dollar question. Could they reveal pressure from other governments, perhaps the U.S., to keep Assange detained? Or could they expose internal discussions about the potential impact of Assange's publications on national security?
It makes you wonder, if there's nothing to hide, why not just release everything? This whole missing documents thing just adds another layer of suspicion.
Exactly. It raises more questions than it answers.
Okay, so back to the Council of Europe. They seem particularly concerned about the possibility of torture. What specifically are they pointing to?
Well, they found that Assange's detention in Belmarsh, a high-security prison, was excessive and disproportionate to the charges against him.
So they're saying he shouldn't have been in that kind of prison in the first place.
Exactly. And they're not alone in this assessment. Back in 2019, Nils Melzer, the former UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, he released a pretty scathing report stating that Assange had been subjected to psychological torture through his treatment.
Hold on, a UN official actually used the word torture.
He did? He even went so far as to call for a criminal investigation into UK officials.
That's huge. Did anything ever come of that?
You know what's even more shocking is that this report was essentially ignored by the mainstream media in the UK. The government didn't really address it either.
So the Council of Europe is basically saying that the UK swept these serious accusations under the rug.
Pretty much. And they're not happy about it.
Now, I'm sure there are some people who disagree with the Council's findings, right? There must be another side to this story.
Oh, absolutely. There are definitely different perspectives on this case. For example, Lord Richard Keane, who's a UK member of the Parliamentary Assembly, he actually voted against the Council of Europe's resolution.
Okay, so what were his arguments? What's the counter-narrative here?
Well, Keane argued that Assange's detention was perfectly legal because he had violated bail conditions and was considered a flight risk.
So he was a flight risk.
That was the argument.
Yeah.
And Keane also claimed that Assange's psychological state wasn't due to torture, but rather a result of his self-imposed isolation in the Ecuadorian embassy for 7 years.
So he's essentially blaming Assange for his own mental health problems.
In a way, yes. He's suggesting that it was Assange's choices that led to his psychological distress, not the actions of the UK government.
Interesting. So are there any facts or evidence to back up those claims?
That's what we need to examine more closely. Were his bail violations significant? Was there concrete proof that he was a genuine flight risk? And is there evidence to support the claim that his mental health deteriorated solely due to his time in the embassy and not as a result of his treatment in Belmarsh?
That's exactly why this deep dive is so important. We're taking a closer look at the different perspectives, the claims, and the evidence to help our listeners understand the complexities of this case.
It's about asking the tough questions and really digging into the details.
Right. It's not about jumping to conclusions. It's about looking at all sides of the story and encouraging people to think critically.
Exactly.
So beyond the legal back and forth, what are the bigger implications of the Assange case? Why should everyday citizens care about this?
That's a really important question. And it's something the Council of Europe is very concerned about. They believe this whole saga could have a chilling effect on journalism and whistleblowing globally.
Okay, so break that down for us. What does chilling effect actually mean in this context?
Well, imagine you're a journalist working on a sensitive story that exposes wrongdoing by a powerful government or corporation. You see what happened to Assange: years of legal battles, imprisonment, accusations of espionage.
So you're saying that other journalists might be hesitant to publish similar stories knowing the risks involved?
Exactly. They might think twice before publishing, fearing they could face similar consequences. That's the chilling effect. It creates a climate of fear and self-censorship. Journalists and their sources might be less willing to take risks, even if the public has a right to know the information.
And that's a dangerous road to go down, right?
Hey.
A free press is essential for holding power accountable if we silence the watchdogs who will keep those in power in check.
Precisely. And it becomes even more unsettling when you consider those reports that we talked about earlier about the CIA's alleged plans to possibly poison or even assassinate Assange while he was in the UK. The Council of Europe is extremely concerned about these reports, as they should be.
Yeah, it sounds like something out of a spy thriller.
It does. But the implications are very real. We're talking about potentially undermining the very foundations of a free press and the right to know.
So it's not just about Assange, it's about the potential consequences for journalism and freedom of expression more broadly.
Exactly. And to really grasp the potential chilling effect, we need to hear from those who are on the front lines of this battle for press freedom.
So let's talk to them. Let's bring in Rebecca Vincent from Reporters Without Borders, a leading press freedom organization that's been closely involved with Assange's case.
That's good.
This is where things get really interesting. What has she witnessed firsthand? How has this case impacted the work of organizations like Reporters Without Borders?
Vincent has been very vocal in her criticism of the UK's handling of the Assange case. She firmly believes that his sentence was disproportionate and that detaining him without charges in the UK was a clear violation of his rights. But what's even more concerning is what she's revealed about her organization's attempts to monitor the case and visit Assange.
What do you mean?
She claims that UK authorities actually obstructed their efforts. They made it incredibly difficult for Reporters Without Borders to observe the case and visit Assange in detention.
Wow, that's a big red flag. If they're trying to prevent transparency and scrutiny, it just fuels suspicions that something's not right.
Absolutely. Transparency is crucial for a functioning democracy, and what we're seeing here are signs of a concerted effort to control the narrative and limit outside scrutiny.
So we've got a lot to unpack here. The Council of Europe is making some serious accusations against the UK, and the implications of this Assange case could be huge. But it's important to remember there are multiple perspectives on this complex issue.
Absolutely.
We need to weigh the evidence, consider the arguments from all sides, and ask ourselves some tough questions.
Right. Is Assange a political prisoner? Did the UK violate his human rights? And what does this case mean for the future of press freedom and the public's right to know? These are questions that go beyond Assange himself. They touch on the very core of democratic principles and the balance between national security and transparency.
Exactly. And that's what we'll be exploring further in this deep dive. So buckle up and get ready for a thought-provoking journey as we delve into the heart of this controversial case. So we ended part one talking about the potential chilling effect on journalism.
Yeah, that's a really important aspect of this whole case.
It is. And, we touched on those disturbing reports about the CIO's alleged plans to target Assange, even considering poisoning or assassinating him while he was in the UK. The Council of Europe expressed serious alarm about these reports, and I have to say, they're pretty chilling.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And if true, they raise serious questions about the lengths to which some might go to silence dissent.
Yeah, it suggests a willingness to operate outside the bounds of law and due process.
Exactly. Which should concern anyone who values democratic principles.
Okay, so we're talking about this potential chilling effect on journalism. Who better to hear from than those who are on the front lines?
Right.
You mentioned Rebecca Vincent from Reporters Without Borders earlier. What insights does she offer from her experience working on this case?
Vincent has been a strong advocate for Assange, and she's spoken out forcefully against what she sees as the UK's unjust and disproportionate treatment of him.
Okay.
But beyond that, her experience with this case highlights the practical challenges that journalists and press freedom organizations face when trying to hold power accountable.
What kind of challenges?
Well, she's revealed the UK authorities made it extremely difficult for Reporters Without Borders to monitor Assange's case and visit him while he was in detention.
Really?
Yeah, they were actively obstructed in their attempts to observe the proceedings and report on the situation.
Wow, that's concerning. It sounds like there's a real lack of transparency here, almost as if they're trying to keep things under wraps.
Exactly. If everything is above board, why not be open and allow independent observers to monitor the situation?
Right.
This lack of transparency just fuels suspicions that something isn't right.
Okay, so we've talked about this potential chilling effect on journalism and these concerning allegations of mistreatment and obstruction of transparency. But let's zoom out for a minute. What are the broader implications of this case? Why should everyday people who might not be journalists or activists care about what's happening to Assange?
That's a great question, and it goes to the heart of why we're doing this deep dive. This isn't just about one man. It's about the fundamental principles that underpin a free and open society. If we allow governments to silence those who expose wrongdoing, to manipulate information, and to operate without accountability, then we're all at risk.
So it's about setting a precedent. If they can do it to Assange, they can do it to anyone who dares to challenge them.
Exactly. It erodes trust in institutions, creates a climate of fear, and ultimately undermines the very foundations of democracy.
Now, we've talked a lot about the negative aspects of this case, but are there any potential silver linings? Has anything positive come out of this ordeal?
Well, one thing that's been encouraging is the groundswell of support that Assange has received from journalists, activists, and ordinary citizens around the world.
So people are paying attention.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're not just blindly accepting the official narrative. And that's a crucial first step. The more people who understand the stakes, who are willing to speak out against injustice and who demand transparency and accountability, the harder it will be for those in power to suppress dissent and control the narrative.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but there's still one major piece of the puzzle we need to examine the specific allegations of torture and mistreatment that Assange endured during his detention. These are serious claims, and it's important to understand the evidence and the arguments surrounding them.
Absolutely. The conditions of Assange's confinement, especially his prolonged solitary confinement and limited access to medical care, have been the subject of much debate and scrutiny.
Right, and we can't forget the findings of Nils Melzer, the former UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, who concluded that Assange's treatment constituted psychological torture.
Right.
He pointed to the constant threat of extradition, the isolation, and the deliberate degradation that Assange experienced.
And Melzer's findings were corroborated by medical professionals and human rights experts who examined Assange and documented the deterioration of his physical and mental health.
So we have serious allegations of torture backed up by expert opinions and medical evidence. How has the UK government responded to these accusations?
Well, their response has been pretty much what we've come to expect, defensive and evasive.
Meaning?
They've denied any wrongdoing, claiming that Assange's detention was lawful and that he received adequate care. However, their explanations haven't satisfied many critics who point to the lack of transparency and the inconsistencies in their account.
It seems like a classic case of trying to sweep things under the rug. If they're so confident in their actions, why not be more open and transparent? Why not allow for independent investigations and scrutiny?
That's a question that many are asking. And it speaks to a broader issue of accountability, or rather the lack thereof. If governments can operate in secrecy, if they can mistreat individuals without facing consequences, then it erodes trust in institutions and undermines the rule of law.
And that's a dangerous path to go down. So as we delve deeper into this case, we need to keep these questions in mind. What evidence supports the allegations of torture? How has the UK government justified its actions? And most importantly, what are the implications for the future of human rights and the rule of law?
These are questions that demand our attention, and we'll be exploring them in more depth as we continue our deep dive. Stay with us as we unravel the complexities of this landmark case and its far-reaching consequences.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture. What are the long-term implications of this case? What does it tell us about, press freedom and government accountability in this day and age?
It's a crucial question. I mean, we live in an era where we have so much information at our fingertips, but at the same time, we see increasing government secrecy and surveillance. The tools that governments have to, monitor citizens, control the narrative, silence dissent, those tools are more powerful than ever before.
It's almost like a paradox, right?
Yeah.
We have all this access to information, but then also this increasing control and surveillance.
Exactly. And the Assange case really brings this tension to the forefront. It's a reminder that these battles are being fought not just online, but also in courtrooms and in the halls of power.
Right. So what does that mean for the average person? What can we do to make sure that our voices are heard and that those in power are held accountable?
Well, first and foremost, we need to stay informed. We need to understand the issues at stake, the arguments being made, and the potential consequences of, our actions or inaction.
So knowledge is power.
Exactly. And we can't be afraid to speak out.
Yeah.
We need to challenge those in power, to demand transparency, and to defend the rights of journalists, whistleblowers, and all those who dare to speak truth to power.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed, when we think about these big global challenges.
I get it.
But I think it's important to remember that every voice matters. Even small actions like sharing information, signing petitions, contacting our elected officials, it all adds up.
Absolutely. We need to create a culture where those in power know they're being watched,
Right.
and they will be held responsible for their actions.
And that starts with each and every one of us.
Right.
Well, I think that's a powerful message to end on. The Assange case, it's complex, it's multifaceted, but it's a reminder that we can't take our freedoms for granted. We need to be vigilant and we need to be willing to fight for them.
I couldn't agree more.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Julian Assange case. We hope this conversation has given you some food for thought and inspired you to learn more about these critical issues.
Absolutely. And remember, knowledge is power. Stay informed, stay engaged, and never stop questioning.
That's it for this episode. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those voices loud.